Hello everyone, Riff Raff Hornhelm here once again with another presentation for the Dwarven Vault, and today we have another entry-level monster review. This is a multi-review, mainly because there's a obvious similarity between these various monsters that we're going to present today. That doesn't mean that their actual effects and abilities are exactly the same, because they certainly aren't. But these are all ones that come from the original Monster Manual, first edition, and were ones that were considered more entry to maybe low mid-level characters for a dungeon back in the good old days, or the early days. And of course, this year we're celebrating the 50th anniversary of the release of Dungeons & Dragons. I don't want to say anything about that because it really reveals how old I am, but I'm very, very familiar with all this. And at the end of the day, we're going to help you understand a bit more about what these creatures can and can't do, and be able to either identify them easier as a player, or certainly to use them, because they're frequently left out of dungeons nowadays. Though all of the ones in today's presentations have created additional versions as the lexicon of monsters for the game has expanded. So, without any further ado, let us set off on our first one here. And the first one we're going to do today is the Ochre Jelly. Now, all of these things, if you think about them, either sound like a bad trip to the sewers, or maybe something distasteful you had when you were a kid eating at lunch. But these are all designed for the dungeon, and the amoeba is a pretty much clear, featureless, you know, like a giant blob of snot, but no green stuff. And it can roll along walls and ceilings, and it's difficult to see, of course. And it is also has a few characteristics that are similar of these types of monsters. One is they're difficult to damage with normal weapons. And the other is that they tend to be either able to ignore certain types of damage, or that certain types of damage will actually cause them to split into multiple creatures. And of course, that could make things a little more difficult. The Ochre Jelly is definitely one of these. If you hit it with lightning, it'll split into separate amoebas, each doing half damage from what they did before. Now, these don't do a ton of damage. What they do is they use their internal juices, similar to a gelatinous cube. Cover that in a different video. And what they do is they dissolve flesh, cellulose specifically, and flesh. They prefer flesh, but they can chew up wood and certain types of plants and so forth, and have a good time with that. But what they really prefer is flesh, and they do it rather quickly. They do 3 to 12 points of damage per hit. Now, they don't have a super high ton of hit dice, and of course, always have to remember that if you're a certain type of character and a certain level below a certain hit dice, you really don't need to worry too much about what's happening for most things. But the NPCs who carry your stuff and the people who are in your party who are lower level, they always have to worry about these. And certainly for mid to lower level parties, these are dangerous creatures. They tend to sneak up on you. They don't make a lot of noise. And when they attack, they can do a fair amount of damage quickly while you're trying to figure out how to kill them. Because normal damage usually doesn't do very much. Now, in this particular case on the amoeba, it can take normal damage. But at the same time, fire and cold are often popular solutions, though not necessarily the best selections, as we'll explore with some of the other creatures here. So this particular Ochre Jelly, I've Honestly, I've considered it, but never actually used it myself. And I've known of it being used only twice. And I talked to a lot of people. They said that while initially scary and maybe doing some damage, they weren't very difficult to dispatch. So really, when we look at these, we look at these as being a very low-level creature, and certainly not a popular one. They do have some appealing aspects which would make it worthwhile putting them into a dungeon or into a specific area, etc. But, like I said, personal experience is very limited, and even the people I speak to, going way, way back, say that other types of jelly-like creatures or slimes or whatever were more popular than this one. Mainly because the other ones can really screw you up. So, let's move on to the next one. And this next one is one that, well, it's a lot tougher. And that's the Gray Ooze. Now, the Gray Ooze is actually a much lower hit dice creature than the jelly, the ochre jelly. Isn't that amazing? But it does very nasty damage to metal and wood. It corrodes them very quickly, similar to a black pudding, but it doesn't have one key effect that a black pudding has. So, but it is also impervious to fire and cold damage. So you want to throw your fireball at this one? Well, good luck, Bubba. It's not going to help you very much. You also have to worry about the effects of normal weapons, because this corrodes metal so fast that if you strike it with a sword or hit it with any kind of a metal weapon, it instantly starts to corrode. And it's a great way for corroding and destroying weapons. Now, unlike the ochre jelly we spoke about here not too long ago, the amoeba-like creature, this, while it is also an oozy type amoeba-like creature, it is once again susceptible to regular damage. And in this case, if you hit it with lightning, it actually will do extra damage. Now, these creatures can develop a kind of a basic intelligence. I've never used that aspect myself. Everybody who's run into these that I spoke to, and this is a much more common creature, have said that it's never been an intelligent creature when they've run into them, and they didn't have that much difficulty with it because, once again, it's not as powerful of a creature in terms of hit dice. So it can be nasty, but probably the nastiest one on this list is going to come up in the none too distant future. But for now, let's move on. Gotta say that the ranking on this is rather low. You can avoid them. They're not fast. They don't have any way of magically doing anything to you. If you encounter them and you don't want to kill them, you can get out of their way in a hurry. And that's true for most of these, to be honest. But, so, not a big problem from either the player standpoint or from the DM standpoint. You know that this is going to be an annoyance, not a party killer. Then, of course, we also have the next one, and that's the green slime. Now, like all of these creatures, there are some differences, and this particular one goes after flesh. It not only goes after flesh, but if it's on you long enough, it will turn you into green slime. And that length of time, I believe, can be as short as 3 rounds. It can be scraped off. Like most of these creatures, if you get anything on you, there are remedies. And like this type of creature, similar to other ones that try and take over your body, a cure disease, or in some cases, I think it's also resurrection, can remove these before you become the things you're not supposed to become. So a green slime, though, is a very low-level creature. It's only 2 hit dice, and honestly, very easy to kill and get rid of. It's more of a surprise thing, and it also has the tendency to sometimes be in fairly large colonies. so that if you run into them and you're stuck in the middle of them, they can be more deadly just because there's so many of them there. But certainly from a DM standpoint, they're an annoyance. They're not a major creature that you throw at your players. And from a player standpoint, these ones are okay as long as it's not in overwhelming numbers. So that's the green slime. Let's move on to the last one, which I think, without question, is the most deadly of this entire group. Now, the last one of this group is far and away the most dangerous, and that would be the black pudding. If you've seen the movie The Blob, that makes me think of the black pudding. Except the black pudding has a lot of power when it comes to what it does. So this is another one of these beings that can eat metal, dissolve it very quickly, and I mean really quickly. And they can even do it with magic metal. So a magic sword or magic armor or magic shield, all of these things would be susceptible. The only difference is that magical items go a bit slower than regular metal. It's a bit, not a ton. If you're in a 10-round battle with this, you could be in some serious world of hurt in terms of your magic items being dissolved by the end of it. That's not a very long battle. So, talking about this one here is also interesting because, yes, you can hit it with normal weapons. Doesn't do it any damage, but it will split it apart. Each one of the segments that splits off is just as powerful. Doesn't have as many hit dice, but it's just as powerful in terms of the amount of damage it does and how quickly it does it as the original host. Same thing happens if you use lightning. You hit it with lightning, it splits into two, and now you got double trouble. Something to keep in mind. Now, in terms of other type of magical damage, or typical magical damage, you don't have to worry about cold. Cold won't do it any damage whatsoever. However, fire does. So magical flames, regular flames, all of those can contribute to it. It is not an intelligent creature, but it is a relentless one. And it can get up there when it comes to hit points. It can get up to about 80 hit points depending on which variant, which is based on size, you run into. An 80 hit point creature is damn near impossible to kill if you're a low-level creature. And this is the kind that just keeps rolling along. It's not super fast, but as long as it can track its target, it continues to pursue it. So this is kind of a nasty one out there. All of these have varying degrees of success against spells. The only one that's really good against it is the Gray Ooze. Gray Ooze is pretty much, you can't do anything to it with normal spells. The rest of these have, in some cases, enhanced saves, but they do seem to be difficult to get with a spell. And when you look at the creature, depending on the size, an area of effect spell is often the only way of really dealing with it. These are the 4 different types of creatures we were looking at today. And the black pudding, without question, when I talk to characters out there, they say, oh yeah, that's the one to watch out for. And they would have ranked it as a mid-level creature, so say a 4 or 5. And certainly from a DM standpoint, I don't know if I'd rank it that high because I think it's relatively easy to get away from. But at the same time, it's a very hard one to get around. So it's somewhat difficult to use sometimes because I don't really want to block off an area to a smaller party when I'm developing a dungeon. But I've certainly found a lot of ways of using them in traps. And I definitely enjoy using this creature on occasion. Now, from a character standpoint, once again, they thought mid-level. The best thing about it was they could usually find a way to get around it by running away and coming at it a different direction. Not always possible in a dungeon, but still, you can certainly try. A simple but effective creature, and in their own way, each of these are None of them are super bad. Most of them are a annoyance to the party. Sometimes they can be very cleverly used to disguise or hide dungeon treasures. I've definitely seen that done very well with a couple of these. So that's our take on these 4 creatures. We'll carry on with more entry level, primarily subterranean dungeon creatures from the original Monster Manual as we go forward, and we welcome your comments and feedback. If you enjoyed what you saw today, please give us a thumbs up, subscribe, tell your friends, come back and see us again real soon, and remember, dwarves rock!